So first of all, I want to talk about just overall workshop safety. The whole point of this is to have fun out in your garage. I mean, to take your car apart and put it back together and enjoy what you're doing and not injure yourself or your animals or your wife or your house, all of which I have examples of. So anyway, that's the point here. So the first thing that we got to consider is fire. Fire is like, boy, it's real creepy. So you got to have fire extinguishers. Better have a couple of them, just hanging in the garage, hanging on the wall. You know where they are. Maybe you've got a sign on top of them so somebody else can find them real fast. There's no obstruction. It's not behind a pile of packages, just hanging on the wall. What kind of fire extinguishers? The ABC, that's what we use in the States. Horrible things. They shoot out this nasty, nasty yellow acidic stuff that puts the fire out. It does put the fire out, but after you use one once, you'll reluctantly use it a second time. You'll try every other method that you can come up with, smothering it with a blanket. If it's a little tiny, just a little tiny fire that won't go out, it's a dripping piece of plastic or something that's on fire, just hit it with the air hose. That'll blow it out easily enough. But you want to be so cautious. Gasoline and anything that's hot, it just is not a good combination. So my example is of our shop when a customer had a Jag sedan, saddle gas tanks. You want to have the fuel sending unit changed. No, there's no gas in the saddle tank. Well, it was full of gas. So my guy took the sending unit out of the saddle tank. The gasoline burst out over everywhere, ran down the cable, dripped onto the incandescent bulb, burst the bulb, lit the gasoline on fire. The flames are 4 foot off the floor. He grabs the fire extinguisher and panics and does not fire blanket. Thanks, Judd. Does not pay attention to the fire extinguisher and expends the entire contents of the stuff on his foot because he panicked. He went into a panic mode. Well, how can you not go into a panic mode? Because every time you start to work on the car with something that might catch on fire, gasoline, gas tank, whatever, just have in the back of your mind, what would I do? What would I do if it caught on fire today? I mean, it's sort of a rational approach before you get the panic situation. So anyway, Ron expended this entire ABC extinguisher, which is pretty good size, on his foot and did nothing to quell the fire. So I took up the second and only the second fire extinguisher I had in the shop, and with the last wisp of that nasty yellow stuff, put out the flame. First thing I did, of course, was to get both fire extinguishers refilled and buy 2 more. You can't have enough fire extinguishers. So just want to be really, really cautious. Dale Moore, those people on the East Coast, remember Dale Moore in Buzzards Gap? Worked on MGs at his house in a garage, which was a drive down a little. He had to descend a little bit to get underneath the house into the garage. Then he was changing a fuel sending unit. Same thing, caught on fire. He got out of it with 2nd-degree burns, but the house, all the animals died. He burned up his wife's possessions. Oh boy, there was probably a lot of screaming that day. Just be so cautious. Be so cautious with fire. Jacks and jackstands. Jacks are for jacking. Jackstands are for holding. Good jackstands, not concrete blocks. Concrete blocks will work if you insulate them from the floor and the car with a piece of plywood, but don't do it. It's just stupid. Just use jackstands. So you use the jack for jacking. You jack up the front first and then jack up the rear. When you're putting it down, jack the rear down first and then the front. You don't have to jack the back up if you just need the front up. You don't need to jack the whole car up if you only need the side up. So you might jack up the right-hand side because you're changing the fuel sending unit. You might jack up the right-hand side because you're down there fiddling with the slave hose and the slave cylinder on an MGB. You might jack up just the left-hand side if you're working with the exhaust. a lot nicer when it's up on all fours, but it doesn't have to be. So just pay attention. You put the jack under the jack. The paddle on the jack has four higher spots on it, and it'll catch on the back side of the cross member. On the T type, the A, the B, the midget. MGC's got a bigger thing on there. I don't know about a magnet. I think that's got a bar across there, but you can put it underneath there and jack. You jack with a clean floor. Your trolley jack has got these steel wheels, right? And anything will stop that steel wheel from moving, especially like a washer or a screw or a chunk of dirt. You want the car to be able to move, and you want the jack to be able to move while you're jacking it up. You don't block the wheels when you're jacking it up. Block them afterwards, but not when you're jacking up, because as you're jacking the car, the car's coming up, right? And so the distance between the car and the jack, it gets less the higher it comes. Same thing with the jack. As it comes up, it's coming farther away from the car. Now, if they're pushing together and the legs here can both move and come together, you're home free. But if the car won't move and the jack won't move and you jack higher, 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 jack pops out from underneath and supports the entire weight of the front of the MGB by the radiator, which will hold it, but it usually wreaks havoc with, with the radiator. I did that in front of a customer. So you just be cautious. Be cautious. When you put the car up, you can block the wheels, but never put it in gear if you've got it just up, like just the front end up. Don't put it in gear, because if you happen to hit the starter, why would you hit the starter? I don't know. Someone's inside. You have somebody to spin it over. They don't know it's in gear. You're fiddling with the starter motor. You touch the lead that runs the solenoid. All of a sudden, the thing wants to move ahead, and it will jump off the jack stands and crush you. So it just isn't worth it. Jack the car up, put jack stands underneath it. Where do you put the jack stands? It depends what you're doing. Almost never is it a good idea to put it underneath the rear axle, because it pushes the wheels up into the wheel arches and you can't even get the wheels off. So you put the jack stands about 3 inches. Let's see, for our man in Auckland, I guess, what's that, 9 mil? Yeah, okay. 8 millimeters or 8 centimeters. Anyway, about 3 inches to the rear of the pivot on the leaf springs. That's a pretty good place to have it there. And then up front, you can have it on the A-arms if you're working on the engine, or you can have it on the frame of the car if you're working on the suspension. Once you get the jack stands underneath the car, usually the car will teeter, because 3 points define a plane. So find out which one is loose, take a wedge of wood or something or other, just jam it in there so it doesn't rock back and forth. It doesn't give you any sense of security. And then climb up beside the car, take a hold of the car and violently shake it and try to pull it off the jack stands. Because if you can pull it off the jack stands while you're standing there, you're not going to get hurt. But if you're underneath the car, pulling on your breaker bar with your smile, waiting for the breaker bar to pop off the drain plug and hit your teeth, you're putting a lot of stress on the car, and you don't want to twist it off the jack stand. I was at GOF Central on July 4th, July 3rd at in Ohio, 2010. Jim Pesta and I were working on a T-type that snapped a half shaft. We're trying to get the broken part of the half shaft out of the diff. And those who campaign T-types have the tool, about 3 feet long, flattened on the end. You put it down the opposite end and hit it with a hammer, and it breaks the broken part of the half shaft out. But we couldn't get it out. So I said, well, let's just take the diff out instead. So we took separated the diff in place, and got the carrier out, And then it was an easy matter just to drive this piece out and put it all back together. But while we're doing that, and there's this line of like 30 armchairs around us with men with either white or no hair watching us as we worked. As one guy says, you might look at that jack stand. I'm not sure that's safe. It was like on the edge of the frame about that far. I mean, it was just so, if we just hit it a little harder, move and we're underneath there struggling with the differential. If we'd struggled a little harder, it would have come off the jack stand. So just pay attention. Pay attention with jacks and jack stands. It's important.
Now go over that rear location for the jack stands, which I assume would be the same place as you put the rear part of a 4-post lift.
Yeah, just about that far behind the toggle bolt that goes through the front of the leaf spring. You put it on the leaf spring. That's where I put it.
On the leaf spring itself.
Mm-hmm. That's where I put it. Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Hey, John.
The wider the paddles, the less of this that you're going to get. If you're working on the leaf spring, you can't put it there. Duh. You got to put it in front of the leaf spring. Sometimes it helps too if you got a car that's the body isn't like really durable, a unibody, a midget, or a B. The earlier cars, they got the solid frames. But you can always take a chunk of 2x4 and put that above the jack, and that sort of evens out the pressure that's on there. But I always put it on the leaf spring. Yep.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you initially lift up the rear of the vehicle using the pumpkin, and
Sure.
then put your jack stands, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But you would not ever jack up the back, put the jack stands there, and then start to jack up the front, because the leaf springs are on an angle and the car will start to move. So that's why you always jack the front first. Front first, back down. So
Okay. So if you're changing out the sensor, the fuel sensor, the sending unit,
jack it up on the right-hand side. Put a piece of, you can't jack around that jack point. All it does is crush. So put a piece of 2x4 along there and jack underneath and just tip the whole car up on the side.
okay. So, all right. So a foot or two of wood around that jacking point, and then jack that up. That's enough? Or you have to do something in the front?
Well, you put a jack stand either under the A-arm up front or under the frame, depending on how high the jack stand is and so forth. So if you have it naturally supported on the suspension, then the car isn't going to teeter at all. It can't. So.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Let's see. Electricals. Okay, so we're blessed with 110 volt. The rest of the world has a 240 or 220 or something that's a lot more dangerous. But just, everyone's got GFIs now. GFIs are cheap. If you don't have GFIs in your garage when you start to set it up for a workshop, please put in GFIs. There's just no problem. I remember reading an article in the MG Owners Club magazine about a battery charger. Somebody had a battery charger and they plugged it in, and one leg of it was connected right through and made the body on the car hot. So when you walk over there in bare feet and touch the rear view mirror, and it's in 240 volts, it's a rude surprise. So just GFIs, just be cautious. Just be cautious of that. Exhaust fumes.
John, while you're on electrical, probably everybody's got it, but I've read that the LED bulbs in your trouble light are a whole lot safer than the old incandescents. So if you have the old incandescent that you can drop into some spilled gas and start a fire, replace them with the LED bulbs.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Yeah. There's just so much stuff's changed. Used to be, if you had to be, well, that's why I call them trouble lights, right? Because no matter where you hang them, they always turn away from what you want to illuminate. they're just trouble. And if you leave one on a seat, you'll burn a hole in the seat with an incandescent in it. Been there. So yeah, yeah. Exhaust fumes, colorless, odorless. It's not odorless. It smells like exhaust, but it'll get you. And you've either got to be working with somebody else, or more carefully, you've got to put some kind of hose on the exhaust and get it outside. If you open the garage door that far and you have a hose that goes out, well, you've got to replace the air that you're burning when you're running the car. So the air comes in underneath the door, and in with that air comes the exhaust. And over a period of time, you're going to get a higher concentration of carbon monoxide than you'd want to. Ernie Chernobyl. No, was it Ernie? No, it wasn't Ernie. Ernie. I can't remember his last name. Was working on a car, and he says tuning up his father-in-law's Electra 225 a long time ago. And he said the next thing he knows is the emergency guys are there pumping on his chest. So it happens all of a sudden. You just got to be really cautious. Cleanliness and clutter.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
before you move on, I have a carbon monoxide sensor in the garage bay where I work. It's a pain in the ass when it goes off, because you're working on an engine running it or whatever, but a carbon monoxide sensor tells you it's sensing fumes. So, in Massachusetts, they're required in all houses, but having it in the garage is really handy when you're working in there and you don't really know if you're getting fumes or not.
Never thought of it. Thank you.
The other thing you might want to think about is if you have a furnace in your garage, heating the garage, you would want to have a carbon monoxide
Yes.
detector also.
Thank you. Yep. Fred, thank you very much. And Alan, thank you for coming in on that. That's very kind. Thank you. Thank you. Cleanliness and clutter. You've been in enough garages, you've seen enough stuff. Here's the engine block with all the studs sticking up out because the head's off. You trip and fall on the cord that's there, and you plunge your abdomen into the engine with the studs. Yuck. And that is the most common. Most of us are a little older now. It's the most common question that they ask on that annual Medicare questionnaire. Have you fallen in the last 6 months? And if you've got cleanliness and clutter, your chances of falling are greater. And it's in old age, it's the fall that gets you. So don't go there. Keep your shop cleaned up. Keep it picked up so you can walk from one place to the other without having to watch out for cords and cables and parts and so forth. Light's cheap. Light's so cheap now compared to when I started off in 1973. You can get for $200, you can buy enough LEDs. I don't know how long they last. They come from Amazon, but oh my gosh, it's like daylight inside your shop. And besides the light, being able to find stuff, I mean, it's so much better than a single 150-watt incandescent bulb swinging in the middle, casting creepy shadows at 2 o'clock in the morning. A lot of light, it makes you feel better. And it also enables you to find all those little tools and parts that you drop in the ground invariably. And it just makes it so much nicer for cleaning up and picking up and seeing what you're doing. Just take the time, spend a couple $100 and just buy. I bought, I don't know, 15 3-footers for $200 or something. Just cheap, or maybe they're 4-footers. I've got them in my basement. I've got them in my shop. They're really, really nice. Batteries are just little bombs. Well, they're not so little, but anyway, they're bombs. They hold 3,000 BTUs of energy. And if you release it slowly, an amp, 1 amp hour, it'll disgorge its contents in 80 hours. You can let out 80 amps in 1 hour, or you can let out a whole lot of amps in a real short amount of time. When you're charging a battery, you're creating hydrogen gas. Hydrogen plus a spark equals the Hindenburg, right? So you don't want to have a fire. You don't want to blow up your battery. So when you're charging your battery, don't make the connection at the battery. Don't make your final disconnect or connect at the battery. Make it at a distance. So that means that when you're charging your MGB, just charge it from underneath the bonnet. If you're just trickle charging it, a couple of amps, just go right to the fuse box. Go to the bottom fuse, 70 through 80, the top fuse, 62 through 69, and just hook it up there. That'll handle, 2, 3, 4, 5 amps, no problem. And then there's no chance of hydrogen gas building up to be ignited. So if you're putting both clamps on the battery and you break one of them off and you get a spark for whatever reason, it's still charging, whatever. And if you've created that hydrogen gas, it's going to blow up. I had a battery blow up on me. I was trying to start a twin cam engine on the floor, and I had an old shop battery frothing. I had my battery charger over on boost, which shooting the 18 volts into it or something or other, and you could see it churning on the inside. And I got jumper cables from that to the engine, and I'm breaking a connection, and all of a sudden I'm disoriented, and oh my gosh, I look down and the whole top of the battery is gone, and I'm wet, so wet with sulfuric acid. Acid washed off okay, and I wear glasses, so I'm not worried about my eyes. But it's not a question of whether batteries kill people. It's just a question of how many people are killed per year. It isn't very many, but it shouldn't be you. So just be cautious. Be cautious of your battery. Towing. With this group, I expect we all just call 1-800-TOW-ME or something or other. But back in the day, when you were towing with rope and hope, you've got the car that's towing and the car that's to be towed. The car that's to be towed must have brakes because he is the brakes for this 2-car system. You keep the rope. Better to use a rope or a strap rather than a chain. A chain's pretty unforgiving. Between the 2 cars, and the guy who's driving up front puts his hand up in the air and says, to say that we're stopping, and the car behind hits the brakes and slows you down. Obviously, it's a red light up front or a stop sign or something or other. So always talk about the route you're going to take before you tow and the speed at which you're going to be towing. We had a guy come back when the shop, we were freeing up a frozen engine, and he was about, 15 feet behind the towed vehicle, and they were probably doing 30 miles an hour. He just didn't have a clue that they were going to be driving that fast. He came back white as a sheet of notebook paper. He was creeped. The best one that I had ever, was a car without brakes. So you have to put brakes on it. So we had a car, the number 1 car was the towing car. The number 2 car was the towed car. And the number 3 car in this line, roped to the number 2 car, was the brakes. And we very carefully wound our way through some city streets to get back to my shop. That was a long time ago. You wouldn't do that. You just call 1-800, tow my MG. Most of those guys are good now. They've got straps that go around the tires, and they don't hurt any of the brake lines. But the old cars, the old tow trucks, had great big hooks, and they'd anchor the front chains. They'd put those hooks on the rear axle and easy for me to say, hydraulically cinch it down, and that would crush both the rear brake lines. Half of the MGBs that we did complete lubes on had crushed rear brake lines. So that isn't a problem much anymore with the way they tow now. The straps are on the wheels, but it is a consideration. What else have I got here? Compressed air. Compressed air is God's gift to mankind. All new houses should be plumbed with compressed air. Imagine having compressed air in your kitchen and you'd pull open the drawer that the food crumbs and the coffee grounds have fallen into, and you just take the hose and go, psst, out the stuff comes onto the floor, and then your dog eats it. So it's great stuff. But if you get too close to somebody, you know, with a blowgun, you can do damage. When we were filthy dirty at the end of the day, sometimes we would blow each other off with a blowgun, and we're running, you know, 110 pounds or something, a lot more than you're supposed to, in the lines. You'd squeeze your eyes as shut as you could get them, and put your hands over your ears, and then your buddy would blow through your hair and around your back and around your butt and the back of your legs, stuff you couldn't see yourself, and get you clean. It also helps out when you're trying to get something apart, a stuck cylinder. So you got a slave cylinder, it's frozen, it won't come apart, you heat it up, you quench it, you hit it with some air, oh, maybe it's gonna move, so but not quite, so heat it up and you quench it again, you hit it with the air, and the piston and the main cup fly all the way across the shop, leaving in its wake a trail of brake fluid. Nothing works faster than brake fluid. I don't think zip strip works as fast to take paint off. So you can end up blowing brake fluid everywhere. That's creepy. You can end up blowing something apart. That is like, oh, where did that little piece go? So just be cautious. Just be cautious. Clothing and protective apparel. Some guys, lots of mechanics, I see them, they wear nitrile gloves. And I guess there's a couple different types of gloves, because some people are allergic to latex or something. Face shields are nice, eyeglasses are nice. All you have to do is get a wire from a wire wheel in your eyeball, and you gain respect for wearing glasses. I didn't get one in my eyeball, but I got one in my forehead. I was working on a wire wheel real heavily and grinding rust and junk off something, and stuff spitting back in my face. And I went in to wash my face afterwards. I touched my forehead, and it's like, ow, what's that? And I looked in the mirror, and here's this wire from the wire wheel, which went right straight into my forehead. I just pulled it out, but it could have gone anywhere else. So anyway, you just got to be really, really cautious with clothing and protective apparel. You don't work on a moving car with loose clothing, or a Mr. T starter kit, or a tie. Just no way. You don't want to even get close when that stuff's going on. So even some people take their rings off when they're working on equipment, just for fear of electrocution, and for getting stuff caught.
And also, if you have a beard.
Yeah, John, my sister has long hair, and she loves to work in her wood shop, and she scares me to death because I can't get her to always put it in a bun, and you only have to catch one strand of hair.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Well, back in the day when the high school teachers used to have to dress up, they'd make the shop teachers wear ties, and the guys that didn't get the snap-on ties, every year you'd read about one of them get their tie caught in a lathe or something. It's just like, oh my gosh.
It tickled me because in engineering school, we were required to wear a tie to class, and we were required to tuck it into our shirt and put it out of sight. The whole thing kind of seemed silly to me.
Well, there was still some decorum. That was nice. But yeah,
This is true.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, sometimes I'm working on a lathe, and I'll be wearing a pair of gloves, and I go, why am I doing this? Because we've all seen enough YouTube videos of people getting sucked into lathes and everything else. I'm almost done. Toxic substances, the toluene, methylethyl ketone, all this kind of stuff that's available and makes cleaning everything easier, greater, simpler. Some people are really, really susceptible to those chemicals. It seeks out the soft body tissues and makes them go haywire. I've used that stuff with impunity. On the other hand, to be fair, I did have a brain tumor removed, the size of a golf ball, went up through my nose. They took it out in little pieces in 1999, but I never ascribed that to exposure to chemicals. But who knows? So you just, just be alert, be cautious. In some areas, Oregon, I think it's Oregon or Washington, used motor oil is labeled as toxic by the state government, or was. You have to have a press to press the oil out of an old filter before you can discard it. Lots of states treat this stuff differently, but the point is, it's creepy. And everything, of course, that comes out of California has that sign that says, warning, known to the state of California to cause cancer or reproductive harm. So anyway, just be cautious with those substances. Grinders and wire wheels. I didn't even have this on the list until 2 days ago. My fingers healed. But I was on the wire wheel, cleaning some stuff, and all of a sudden I got too close, and it's a pretty fierce wire wheel. You can do severe damage to a digit or get sucked in. Or if you're buffing something, buffing wheel, all of us have had some kind of chrome piece on a buffing wheel, and you have forgotten how tightly you should hold it, and all of a sudden it comes out of your hand at 100 miles an hour. It can bounce and come back and hit you. So just be cautious of wire wheels and grinding wheels. And today I was reminded, I had a gentleman call me from mid-state Florida, and he said, as long as you're talking about workshop safety, remember spiders. And he recounted a story where he took in a Jag that was a living arachnid display of brown recluse spider eggs. He said they're all over the car. He knew what he was looking at because the eggs had spikes on them or something. But we had one come in the shop one time that had mites, these little tiny spider mites, I guess, little tiny red things. About halfway through the afternoon, the guy was working on the car says, I can't sit still. I got to go home, wash these things off. And Lisa at our shop suffered some anaphylactic problems. And so I had a car that came in from Las Vegas. It was a Tahiti Blue Bee. I remember the car, and it was just laden with rodent stuff. And no problem with me. I just took my blowgun, started blowing it out, and that dust ended up in the front of the shop. And she jumped in her car and went down to the pharmacy and bought a bottle of, I don't know what she bought, Dristan, I don't know what you buy when you're going to anaphylactic shock, but she said she didn't even pay for it. She opened up the bottle and just started chowing it down there. Paid for it on the way out, of course. But it's just be careful. Theo Verbrugge was working for us. We used to keep cars in a garage up the street when we were on Eastern Avenue, and there was a guy who had a key to that place, and he trapped possums and had possums in a 55-gallon drum that he would pull out from time to time to supplement his diet. And we got this midget down, and I don't know if we're taking it apart for parts or going to fix it or what. And Theo's wedged himself underneath the passenger seat, and all of a sudden, here's this creepy creature in there, hissing at him. So just be aware. Just, it's all about having fun. It's all about having a nice clean shop and being able to find stuff when it falls on the floor, being proud when other people come by. And the whole goal is not to injure yourself while you're working on it. So what did I miss?
John, I'd like to mention one other thing.
Sure.
Gas cans. Everybody likes to carry a little gas. They keep it in their garage, but if you've got a gas burning water heater,
Yeah.
not a good thing to do. So keep that in mind.
We had a customer who worked for State Farm, Bloomington, Illinois, came up for a technical seminar years ago. 30 years ago. And we're talking about fire. And he says, well, I handled a death claim. He said, this some time ago, teenage girl's out mowing the lawn, runs out of gas, goes in the garage, gets the metal gas can from the garage, goes, fills up the mower, comes back, puts it down on top of a storage battery. And it blew up. It killed her. So yeah, gas cans. Thank you.
Another thing that happened, heater hose laying on the cement and for a couple of days, and some kind of bees decided they're gonna make it their home. That's a scary thing when you pick that up.
We had just corollary to that. We had a guy who put his whole car back together, and it just overheated. It just wouldn't cool right. He just said, I'm sick of dealing with this. Just make it run for me. And we found a mouse nest inside his radiator. He had his radiator sitting, I don't know, in a corner or something or other. And it's a nice, cool, dark place. Mr. Mouse set up house there, and it prevented the free flow of coolant through the radiator.
Yeah,
Okay.
John, when we drag these cars in and out of the desert, you have to be a little bit careful about rattlesnakes.
Okay,
So just one of those critter stories.
a critter. Okay, I'll put that along with creatures. I'll include snakes. Yep.
Yeah, this is a little bit different tact, but talk about gas, propane, oxyacetylene, MAP gas. Those are great things to heat stuff with, but you need to be cautious what you're heating with, not touching it with your fingers, that sort of thing, because it remains hot after you heat things up.
Even the exhaust. In our complete lube, it's like violently shake the exhaust. See if it rattles, just so we had long before we had hoists, guy had an ANSA. Can't remember what the part number was, but it's a dual chrome tip. And I had the car running for, 20 minutes inside our club. It wasn't really closed. We had the fans on and stuff. And so I'm doing a lube and doing a tune all at the same time, and it says, grab the exhaust and shake it violently. And I grabbed this exhaust, and it was like pan frying a steak. I mean, my hands it had all these different contact areas where it blistered. It really, really hurt. So thanks. That's yep. Those are all wonderful things. The propane torch and the MAP gas. I've only used MAP gas once. But it's if propane doesn't get you hot enough, MAP gas will. Oxyacetylene is the Cadillac of gases. Used it today doing some welding. But you don't want to forget. You don't want to forget that it's hot. So by your grinder where you're grinding and polishing and all that kind of stuff, you're creating a lot of heat there from the friction. Always have a big jug of water, a pail of water there to plunge your part or your hand into. A couple of years ago, Tony Burgess asked me to come and do a rolling tech at the mini meet in Dayton, Ohio. And I thought about it for a while. I said, sure, I can do that, I guess. You can't reach anything on a mini, but I'll try. And he said, well, what are you going to need? And I said, well, everything that I usually do, which is a tent and a table to lay out my tools. And I said, and then a piece of foam so I can kneel on it while I'm trying to adjust the carburetors, and a 5-gallon pail of water so I can plunge my hand into it and cool off my hand after working on those carbs. A 5-gallon pail of water is a real nice thing to have around, just rare circumstance that you have to cool something down like your hand very quickly.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
Our club is fortunate enough to have a 2-bay garage with 2 and 4-post lift, and we have a rule. You can't always do it in your home shop, but never do anything with only one person in the shop.
Never work in the shop alone. That's not,
And in my own shop, I don't always do that, but I certainly try to do it. And I would never get under my car or put my car on my lift if I was the only one there.
okay. Okay, Paul Deershow, sports car craftsman, Arvada, Colorado, just about 2 years ago. He's more retired now than he was 2 years ago, but he just retired and he was in his warehouse. And he said he woke up under I don't know, a 1-ton cart of makeup, something, exhaust manifolds, something, or alternators. He said he wasn't exactly sure how he got there, but his arm was broken. His arm was broken right below the ball, the ball and socket. It was broken there. He had a couple of ribs that were crushed. Somehow he got out of there. He got out from underneath wherever he was and got into his truck and got home. Couldn't get out of his truck when he got home. He hurt too much, but he got that far. And I said, Paul, you've got my list, right, of workshop rules, all kinds of stuff about running a MG shop. And he goes, yeah, never work alone. Yeah, I mean, but at home, it's a little different. And we had a guy here in town, Cliff Bridge, British guy, came to town in 1952, needed some work on his Morris Minor or something or other, and never left until he went to work for Jason Len at XK's Unlimited in San Luis Obispo in, I don't know, 1978 or something. But he worked for the dealer, and then he worked by himself, and worked for the dealer again. And he had a rag on his hand, and he plunged it down through an MGB cylinder block to clean the crap off the walls after honing it. And his hand popped out the bottom, and he couldn't get his hand out. And it was at noon, and he was in the shop at the dealership. It must have been somebody up front. But the story was that he was trapped there, leaning over the fender, probably on his tiptoes. He was a short guy, and with his hand stuck in the engine, he couldn't get it out. So yeah, don't work alone. That's a real good rule. But for home, you're working in your own shop, and hopefully there's somebody else out there, and you can always, now, of course, you just keep your cell phone by you someplace that you can crawl to it or reach it or poke it with a stick or something or other, get it over to
No
you.
good on the shelf. It's got to be in your pocket.
Yeah. I'm the right
John,
guy.
one other thing, Ed Hurston here. One other thing when it comes to volatile substances is being aware of sparks from your grinder.
Okay. You have personal experience with this?
Oh, a little bit.
Well, tell me.
No, it's just I had some rags on a shop bench, and I was using a handheld grinder,
Yeah.
and I wasn't paying close enough attention to where the sparks were going, and I thought I smelled something funny and turned around, and it was shop rags on fire on my bench. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
John, one other thing, it's unlikely, but it could happen after you've driven your car on a hard drive a long time, and if you have a car cover, don't put on the car cover right away, especially hanging off the back so it touches the tailpipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a potential
Okay.
fire hazard, maybe, at least it might,
Hey, yeah.
wait until the car cools, or at least until the tailpipe cools off before you.
Yeah, I mean,
put the
that's-
car cover.
That isn't very long. So yeah, that makes sense.
John,
Yeah.
I'd started working on my daughter's Nissan Versa, doing the exhaust. And I got to the point where I had to take off the bolts on the manifold, and they wouldn't loosen for me. So I turned the rest of the job over to a professional mechanic that I've used, and he was using heat to get those loose. And so he heated them with a torch, got a call, went into his office, was in his office for a while, and when he came out, a mouse nest that had been on top of there caught fire. The car was on fire. There was a major fire in his shop. Had lost her car. He had what 6 months of rebuilding the shop before we could start working in there again. Yeah.
Oh
So
my gosh.
turn your
Oh,
head after you've done some heating or grinding either.
yes. Okay. That's a good story. That's it. Just who would guess? Who would guess that something like that could happen? Yeah.
Another thing about rags, oily rags or solvent soaked
Thank you.
rags,
Thank
make
you.
sure you put those into a closed container that's not combustible because they can self-ignite. So let's be very
Yeah.
careful with
That's probably under my
oily and solvent soaked rags.
That's probably under my section about fire. Store, yeah, it's the first thing under the, and I missed it. Store dirty, oily rags in a sealed container or laid out. So they get a lot of ventilation, but not in a pile. We had a guy in Grand Rapids who was doing furniture restoration and something lacquer thinner, something or other, it's pretty volatile. And so in this workshop, somebody says, "Whoa, dude, what's going on?" And they said that the whole band around this, this old 55-gallon drum or 30-gallon drum or something or other was just red hot around the outside of it. Flames are coming out the top. So all they did was take somebody's table or something and just flip it upside down and put it on top of it, went right out. But oh my gosh, yeah, it's creepy. It's creepy. Fire is so creepy.
I have another rule. It's never work directly below something. So your face is what's going to catch whatever falls. And Gloria learned that the hard way. She was putting a cap on. We replaced the rod bearings, put the cap on, and it stayed there. So she reached over to get a wrench, ended up with a concussion as it fell down. So she learned that the hard way. Don't ever lay under something when you're doing it.
These are all good lessons. I wish there were more people on here to listen. Listen to that. I will have to do SU carburetors next time, bump the numbers up. Are there any more comments about workshop safety, or we're going to go over to the chat section?
I had I was doing an engine last summer, pulled the engine out, decoupled the manifold, which was a header system. It was an MGB GT 72 in it. And it was summertime, so I had the shop door open and I had peanuts to feed the squirrels. They're friendly enough. And I went to put the manifold back on and I thought, well, I'll just blow it out to make sure everything's cool. And I blew it out and a whole bunch of peanuts flew out of the manifold, which was lucky because they would have gotten caught up in the muffler, but they were in no shape to be fed to the squirrels. But just to say, if you leave stuff like that, a varmint's going to put something in it. And they're not varmints, they're friends of mine, but mice are notorious for doing that to a unsupervised vehicle.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Thank you very much. That's
John,
yeah.
since we travel a lot, we carry with us, we got 2 small jack stands that we got at the Chicago Swap Meet some years ago.
Okay.
2 wheel chocks, which we don't use until we get the car jacked up, and a scissors jack, along with if you got the one-legged jack, that's fine, but they're not reliable. So I always carry a scissors jack with me. It just we're nuts about being safety conscious, especially when you're on the road and you're in the middle of the desert with 100 miles from nowhere. You need to be really safe.
Thanks.
John, one thing that I'd like to talk about is shelving units. If they're against the wall, which they often are, they should always be attached to the wall and put the heavy stuff at the bottom.
Okay. All right, you have personal experience with a failing shelf?
It's not so much failing, it's, you know, you kind of lean up or you're tempted to stand on the bottom shelf to get something.
Yeah,
It
okay.
wasn't at home, it was in the factory that I was responsible for. We had an incident like that. But even in homes, you know, it's not a smart idea to have a bookcase full of books, because if a kid, you know, can imagine the problem that that causes.
Yes.
And then talking of children, I've got relatively young children, and they, from time to time, will come in the shop when I'm there, and I'm just really cautious about that, because in an instant they do stuff that an adult would never do.
Yep. Yep. Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you for that. That's yep.
I'd like to just endorse the comment earlier about your cell phone. If you've got it close, put it in your pocket. My son, he went over a cliff in his car and he didn't have it in his pocket and he couldn't find a cell phone. And so he had to he got out of the car, all right, but he had to climb up a cliff to wave down somebody to ring his phone to find it. So if it's not in your actual pocket, and if he'd got stuck in the car, he would have never been able to have been found. So, you know, it's cell phone's really good if you've got it.
Oh my gosh, this is on some isolated highway.
Yeah. It was on a bush-covered, a twisty bush highway. He went over a bank. You couldn't see where he went over, and he was like 10 meters, 30 feet down a hill.
Oh, geez.
Through a whole bunch of trees.
Yeah.
And so you'd never have found him if he got out of the car, right? He was lucky he'd just done a helicopter escape course. So he knew what to do. But the issue was that he couldn't find his phone because it was just lying loose in the car
okay.
Yeah.
That's when I wrote all this stuff in 1980, there weren't any cell phones. So yeah. So that's a powerful examples here. Thank you.
Hey, John.
Yes.
Are you taking any fuel pump questions?
Sure.
I have an MGA in 07. I replaced the fuel pump. It was running good. The other day I'm coming home. It stopped. Had to take the cover off the back, wrap it with a screwdriver. It got me home.
Okay.
I haven't driven it since. But I have a fuel pump. It was rebuilt July 10th of 07. New points, capacitor, gasket, and diaphragm. Never had gas in it. So it's 17 years old. Is it okay to use it, or would that diaphragm be dried up?
Well, no, the diaphragm isn't going to be dried up, but I would hook it up and then run a gallon of gasoline through it first, just to make sure that it keeps clicking, because even new stuff that you get sometimes when you get a new control box regulator, note on the outside that says clean points before using, because on the trip across the Pacific, there's some salty air there. So you could make a case for taking some really fine paper, 1,000, 2,000 grit paper or something or other, and just
touch the points.
Yeah, running between the points. That's all.
Yeah. Well, the old pump I put in at 17 years ago did good till I was coming home with my wife the other night. It was dark.
Of course.
And I didn't have the tools in the car, or screwdriver to get that back cover off with the battery, and that's it. I had us luckily in front of the house, went up to knock on her door if I could borrow a screwdriver, took the cover off, wrapped it with the handle, and start ticking again. So I don't know if all that's neat, but it's 17 years old, and I got this other one, and I like to put the one in I had rebuilt, and hopefully it's not dried out, or it should be okay. Just run it a little bit.
Should be okay. Yeah. Another trick you can use when you're driving along the road and all of a sudden, you're pretty sure you're out of gas, that's the problem. You just take the key and switch it on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. And sometimes it's not, I'm not an electronics guy, so I know this isn't correct, but I tell people it surges the electricity through the points. And sometimes just doing that, all of a sudden it'll start working again. So anyway, that's always an option. And I do remember almost having a bloody fist in an MGB GT with a passenger seat folded forward, and every time I would feel it start to falter, I'd take my hand and beat it against the back of the seat there. Oh my gosh, yeah, my hand really hurt, but so.
Well,
we used to,
when this died on the way home, I didn't know what happened, but then I turned the key on and off and I didn't hear any ticking. So I really assumed it was the fuel pump. And the people who I stopped to borrow their screwdriver must have thought I was goofy. This was about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and dark. I got it home in about 8 miles or so. Haven't driven it since. And I found this old pump that was rebuilt. Just wanted to put it in. It should be okay.
Should be okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
Hey, you're welcome.
Okay, anyway, I said who I was. I was Bob Gatesy from Solon, Ohio.
Okay, all right.
I'm suburb of Cleveland.
Yep.
Okay.
We found a heavy wrench beating on the fuel pump. We'll give you a temporary go. It took 4 times on the way home from Ashtabula County, but we got home.
Great.
Yeah.
Do we have any more comments about workshop safety? And it's 8:12, so we talked about that for about an hour, and that's probably enough, unless somebody else has got some really good, interesting story.
I've got one, John.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Martin Heisel from London, Ontario. And I'll just say I was watching the first part, having dinner, and my wife heard all the stories, so I suspect she'll never let me go in the garage again. But
no, it's better than that. She's always going to be out there with you.
Well, there's that.
I don't know if that's better or not. That's take Judd's advice there. So yeah.
So my story, it sort of follows up with Tim's, and sort of the advice is watch kids, probably pets too, if you're in a garage. And the story that I was told by my parents for years, I was maybe a toddler, 2, 3, something like that. My dad had walked next door, was in the neighbor's garage chatting with him. I loved apple juice, and I think the neighbor had a big apple juice tin that he had filled with mineral spirits or something. And as my dad was chatting with him, here was little me lifting the thing up. And they don't know whether I actually drank any of it, but I started to go over. And the story that I heard is my dad was running back to the house with me upside down by a foot. And that was probably my first visit to the emergency department. So
kids, yep. Kids in the workshop. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another solution might be to put a baby monitor in the kitchen.
It depends on how far away your shop is from your kitchen. Yeah, but that's Martin, all right, brings up, we have a tendency to reuse old containers, and that's probably something we should avoid, and particularly food containers. But gasoline goes in red containers, kerosene goes in blue containers, and so on. It's probably some good rules to follow.
So you're saying I shouldn't be using my plastic old spring water containers for brake fluid.
Bingo.
I used back in the days when you could buy Castrol LMA in those nice little bottles, and you get the aluminum foil out of the way, and I was checking for gasoline flow. Tick, 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 and I got the thing a third filled with gasoline, put it on the bench. Later on, I'm grabbing the brake fluid, top off the master cylinders, and I pour gasoline into, I don't remember, it was the clutch of the brake. And I thought, I could just suck this fluid out and it'll be okay. But I was uncomfortable doing that. And so I took the master cylinder out and rebuilt it, just so that there was no hint of any problem. But yeah, using the correct containers. Oh, and then when you put things into a rag, this isn't really workshop safety, but you've taken something all apart and there's a bunch of little screws and washers in a shop rag, and you're going around picking up all the shop rags, right? Because it's time to get them all clean, and you grab that and yank it. Yeah, it's like a dandelion with all its little floaters, yeah, going everywhere. So,
Hey, I've got a good story for you about cleaning a garage.
yeah.
When I was 3 years old, I was staying with my grandfather, and I thought his garage looked kind of dirty. So I went and cleaned it out. I took the boards off the center pit in the garage where they used to service the cars. And I put everything in the garage down in the pit, and I covered it up with the boards again.
That's good. That's good. Oh my gosh. I'm going to switch over to our chat section now.
John,
yes.
I'm sorry. I want to go back to the battery thing.
Yes.
When I put my car away, I put the trickle charger on both terminals. Should I not do that?
You should not do that. The easier way is simply open up the bonnet and put this is just like a battery maintenance thing. One of those little, yeah, just what year and model do you have?
79B.
Okay, so you put the red terminal on a clip that holds the bottom fuse.
I'm sorry.
Put on your fuse box, take the red connector from the battery charger and put that on the bottom fuse, on the clip there, and then take the negative and hook it to, I don't know, an engine stud or the back of the alternator. Now all the charging is being done up front. You don't have to open it up and look at the battery. It's just and all the connections are there, and it's just as safe. I've wired one in permanently on my daughter when I redid my daughter's 73 BGT. I put it underneath, just screwed it to the inner fender, just screwed it there. And so that when she came home, she could open up the bonnet and pull the plug out. Or if you don't even want to do that, you could always have the plug hanging out from outside the car, but that looks kind of tacky. She has to at least open the bonnet and then just plug it into an extension cord. There you go. You're all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Skip. I'm over to Skip. Skip with the first message on the chat tonight. Are you still on? What is the proper installation and sealant for a 63 MGB sending unit with the 6 screws? So you want to use a cork gasket. Just had this up at Mark Brandau's shop this past weekend. We had a rubber gasket there. I don't know, neoprene, Viton, I don't know what it was, but it leaked. And the solution here is use Permatex #2, used to be called aviation gasket compound, but it's still Permatex #2. Oh man, it looks like treacle. It's like syrup, and it gets on your fingers, and gasoline won't take it off because it's impervious to gasoline. But it's just the greatest stuff. So you just coat both sides of the port gasket with Permatex #2, put it on the tank, put it on the sending unit, and put it on the screws, and just snug it all up, and it won't leak. So easy. Here we got Picton to everybody. Who's Picton? Are you on? You can unmute yourself if you are. Restoring an MGA and about ready to install the heater assembly. What's recommended as a seal? Gasket, caulk. There's a rubber seal that goes on the bottom of that heater assembly that goes against the firewall. It's a rectangular gasket. It's not available. You can't get one. You don't want to order one. Go to the hardware store. I wouldn't use open cell foam because that.
What?
She does?
So that's my mute all button. So anyway, some sort of closed cell foam, but real thin stuff underneath there. Sometimes you can get it with adhesive on one side. So the screws will go right through it. Those 1032 screws, 2BA screws, will go right through that kind of stuff. Here we've got David Wren. Oh, yep, we got that. We already talked about that, David.
Yeah, I think you've already answered that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, but you got Permatex products in?
I don't know. I've got the gaskets, but I'll have to see if I get some Permatex.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Permatex number 2 or
Okay.
whatever that translates to. So
Yeah, no, that's fine. That should be good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tom Gunderson, if you're on, you can come on.
Yeah,
Tom,
how you doing, John?
pretty good. So Tom says, is it hard to replace the front shocks on a 1957 MGA 1500 Roadster? I have a pair from Worldwide next week. So no, but here's the trick. The shock has one, it's got an axle on it. It's got one arm that's welded to the axle. Take the other arm, which has got a transverse bolt and a long bolt that holds it to the other arm, and slacken or take them out, and then you're able to work the arms a little separately and get the arms a little bit wider than they normally will be. That's for reinstallation. Just coming out, it should be pretty easy.
All right, so are you? What do you put in there to stretch it wider?
You just struggle with two hands. Just struggle.
Oh,
the one arm will come a little loose.
okay.
Or tunk it with a hammer. Don't beat on it. Just tunk it with a hammer, and it'll start to come loose. Cars up on jack stands. You bring a trolley jack in from the opposite side, as far out underneath the kingpin as you can get, and jack up. You don't want to bend. You don't want to bend anything and so forth. But you want to get it as far out on the A-arm as you can. It's just easier if you come from the other side. And jack it up so that the suspension comes up off that egg-shaped rebound rubber that's on there, just as long as it's up above there. And then use your 3/4 inch wrench and 3/4 inch socket and get the castle nut out of there. You can take the time to pull the split pin out of there with a pair of dikes, the side cutters, diagonal pliers, or you can just drive the socket on and turn the wrench, and it'll shear the cotter pin, and then drive it out later on when it's up on the bench and you can see it. And then that's supposed to come out easily from the distance tube that's lying inside the top trunnion. It's supposed to come out easily. If it doesn't, if it's rusted, oh boy, now you got to cut the thing off with a hacksaw, and that's just a terror. But don't take anything off the car. Your car is the best vice that you can possibly find. So you can use a pretty good sized hammer, back the castle nut out to the end of the threads. Don't take the castle nut all the way off the bolt, a 1/2 inch bolt, and then start hitting it, because you'll mushroom the end, and then it won't go through the shock. It won't go through.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Keep a nut on there, or get another 1/2 inch fine, 1/2 inch 20 fine nut to put on there to drive it farther. Anyway, it all ought to go pretty easily. Use a lot of grease when you put it back together.
The red tacky.
Yeah, yep. Number 2, lithium grease. It's sold. I buy it at Napa under the trade name of Lucas. There's some humor. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Absolutely. Wayne in SLO. Come on, just a minute. Salt Lake, no. Wayne. Where's Wayne from? Where's SLO?
San Luis Obispo.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, you got to be a Californian to get that one. I found some oil in the face of the throw-up bearing on my TD clutch. Some oil at the clutch end of the shaft from the transmission. I suspect the oil is from the transmission. Could be, and it's easy enough to change that seal. That whole front cover comes off of those eight bolts, the eight 8x1 metric bolts. You can use your 5/16 or your 13mm wrench to get those off. There's no gasket on the front of the gearbox. That's another good place for that #2 Permatex. And you can drive the old seal out and get a new seal and put it in. Easy schmeezy. You should, when you go to put the cover back on the gearbox, when you go to put that back on, you should wrap the splines, the 10 splines, wrap that with masking tape and put some grease on that so that the seal slides along that, and there's no chance that one of the ridges on there can cut a little tiny slit in that seal. So just masking tape. And then when you're all done, just take the masking tape back off the splines.
Thank you.
You're going to do as much as you can there. Since there's no rear seal on the engine, all you can do is change the front. It's probably from the engine, but because this all is from the engine. That's the rule. There are exceptions. But yeah, that's a pretty straightforward job. When I went to do that in a garage at the owner's home in Savannah, Georgia, a year and a half ago, I'm looking at the front bearing and all the balls have moved all down, and the cage, that brass cage on that bearing, that 1 3/8 G bearing, the cage had all got down below, and we had to change the front bearing on that. And of course, to do that, you got to take the whole gearbox apart. Anyway, with luck, you won't have to do all of that. But there's lots of MG people in that middle part of California.
Thank you.
All right, Steve Olson is reminding us that the sparks from the cutoff wheel will ignite an old moving blanket, maybe not even soaked in oil. Then you will wish the aerosol cans next to it on the shelf were somewhere else. Fire extinguisher will not put out a smoldering blanket, will make a huge mess. That's the rule about that, but you can grab that blanket and pull it outside. Luckily, a bucket of water put the fire out, but the mess from the extinguisher remained. So Steve Olson, you got some experience with that ABC fire extinguisher.
Yes, it makes a nasty mess and it's tough to clean up.
It's horrible. After you use one time, it's like, what, the next fire you have, you go, what other option do I have to put that fire out before I use that? It works, but it works in flames. So anyway, okay.
Hey, John, can you back up to the one you just missed?
Yes, sir. Oh, can you explain the vacuum solenoid operation used on the overdrive trans? And George, that's a 63 through 67 MGB. You got depress your space bar because I can't hear you.
Okay. It's on the newer models of the MGB with the overdrive transmission. You got the little solenoid that sits and is mounted right up on the brake attachment, and it runs a vacuum tube over to the distributor. What's the purpose? What's this all about?
Federal government in emissions. So the easiest way to control emissions is to fiddle with the timing. So they, for whatever reason, decided that the vacuum advance would only work in 4th gear. So it's the same circuit as the overdrive, it has nothing to do with the overdrive, but that's why the overdrive only works in 4th and not 3 and 4 like it used to. It worked in 3 and 4 up through 76, but 77 through 80, they put that solenoid on the vacuum advance, so it only works in 4th gear. I had a customer, this is a strange story. I had a customer who took his washer pump, which is of course on the other side, next to the washer solvent bottle, plumbed that to that solenoid and plumbed that into his squirters. And when I saw that, I said, your squirters only work when you're in fourth gear? And he looked at me and he said, how did you know? So anyway, the best thing you can do with that is disconnect it and plumb your vacuum advance directly from the intake manifold to the vacuum advance. Get rid of that switch altogether, but that's an unfused circuit. That's its main danger. So do you have overdrive, George?
Yes, I got an overdrive, but it appears to me that when that solenoid is engaged, when you put it in fourth gear, it allows that solenoid to engage, and it actually turns the vacuum off instead of turning it on.
Well, I thought it was the other way around. I could be wrong, but it seems to me that you get the, in any case, don't use it.
Just bypass it.
Yeah, just, it comes off real easily. Take this got two little Phillips screws that hold it in place, take those out, put the thing in a box of used parts for the next owner. That's what everybody always says. And then hide the wires underneath the brake box so you can't see them. But the most important thing to do is fuse the overdrive circuit. And the overdrive circuit is either a white with brown wire or a white wire that's either encased in the overdrive circuit loom, excuse me, in the gearbox loom. The gearbox loom has got a green and a green with brown that run the reverse lights.
Right.
And sometimes it's with that, sometimes it's separate from that. But take that and cut the wire and plumb in a 10 amp inline fuse, because it's an unfused circuit, and I have seen it when it burns all the way from the key switch, all the way across the dash to that joint that powers the fuel pump. And that's where that's plugged in, and then all the way down to the gearbox. It's just it's so horrible to lose a wiring loom for that reason. Just for one of a fuse.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Hey, John, excuse me, before you leave, Steve Olson sparks from the cutoff and the burning blanket and the ugly fire extinguisher. Y'all may want to Google the Element fire extinguisher reviewed by Jay Leno. I have no interest in it, but he was really proud of it and seemed to think it was a good fire extinguisher that doesn't leave an ugly mess. So use whatever you all want to do.
Okay, thank you. I have heard of those. I have.
I think they're right pricey.
Oh, okay. Anything's better than nothing, man. Jay Rudin, I measured the camshaft lift for the intake and exhaust today at 265 and 268 respectively for 71 MGB with 55,000 miles. Does that sound right? It sounds excellent. The stock lift is 265. The 268 for exhaust means that the cam is from someplace else. Are you still on, Jay? But anyway, you have to use a magnetic dial indicator usually to do this and get the valve train out of the way. It's a real big hassle to measure, but that is the only way you can tell if the cam is good. So. Ben Andrews, the lower fuse clips on the 4-fuse box are also great for hooking up your timing light and dwell meter or any other 12-volt source that you need, in addition to your trickle charger. I've seen many people try and rig some subpar wires to get the battery. Early cars, a non-issue due to the external solenoid. So what Ben's talking about is that the earlier cars that have got that 63 through 67 have got a solenoid right on the inner fender. It's really easy. You can go there and get a 12-volt power source, no problem, or use it to charge your battery, whatever, because it's hooked to the main battery cable. But those clips for hooking up a battery charger are great. So I just drove by your house the other day, Ben. I was on, coming back from Minneapolis. I was on 80, 90, and 94, all that distance there around Valpo. Brad Schwartz, always disconnect the ground side of the battery first. Always connect the ground side last. This prevents a wrench from shorting the battery to the frame. Okay, that makes sense. And sometimes when you're taking off a battery, you can end up getting in a mess. So that's good advice. Thank you. Joe Vins, John, any issues with using a battery maintenance hooked up via the cigarette or cigarette lighter? I've done it and it works, but I wanted to check with you. The only issue there at all, and it's not really an issue, is that it goes through a fuse before it goes to the battery. And of course, on the later model cars, 70 through 80 MGBs, and the midgets, same years, although their fuse boxes are mounted upside down from a B. It makes all the sense in the world to do something like that that's non-invasive. So Pat Garrity, okay, from California, we once resurrected a mini moke. The mice had been storing dog food in the radiator shroud. When we fired it up, we were pelted with flying kibbles, and it was served up by the blades of the fan, and it hurt. Very cool, very cool. Are you still on, Pat? I don't know.
Still here, John.
Hey, okay, great. Yep. We had a TR4, TR250 that hadn't been run in a long time. And we started it up and it sounded like, and we thought it was I mean, it didn't sound like a rod knock, but what else was it? You know, we got oil pressure, started it up, and we get this rap, and it was the dog food getting shot out of the exhaust, hitting the exhaust, the metal exhaust can.
Yeah.
Bing, 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 bing. It was, yeah, so.
Gives new meaning to the term rat rod.
Okay, very cool, very cool.
Thanks, John.
See, Pat also has, when working on fuel pumps, tie a rag around your wrist to prevent the fuel from, he says migrating, but I'd say running down your arm to your armpit. Very cool idea. If you're working upside down and you've got a rag around your wrist, that's a real cool idea, Pat. Thank you. Thanks. And here we go. Pat's on it again. The best sending unit gaskets are from the frame up in Phoenix, Arizona. And Seals All, which is a trade name for a gasket compound, added to the gasket. I disagree with John on this one. So that's okay, Pat.
Those gaskets are very cushy, unlike the thin rubber ones. They're thick and cushy. So even if the sending unit is bent, add the Seal All and you will not leak. Guaranteed.
Okay. From the
Great
frame
stuff.
up. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And
I think Doug has those made.
Sure.
Yeah.
You'd have to. Doug Pelton's got a wonderful selection of stuff for TCs, but some stuff, the rear wheel bearing on a 1950 MGTD fits a 1980 MGB. So there is some continuity of stuff. So if you think it might be earlier, Doug Pelton from the Frame Up, Phoenix, Arizona has good stuff. Thank you, Pat. Very kind.
All right.
Ben Andrews, on an MGB tube type axle, is there a gasket from the brake backing plate to the axle housing? No. I don't have a leak inside my drum brakes that I can see, but I have a telltale trail on the inboard side of the backing plate towards the brake bleeder from the 4-bolt bearing housing flange of the axle. A lot of big words there. You've got a rear axle, you've got a housing that fits on top of it, There's no gasket that goes there. However, you can use gasket compound when you're pulling it up. There's no gasket. If you put a gasket there, then the bearing, which is inside, can float. You don't want that going on. You want it trapped tightly. But you can use gasket compound, and that will reduce all the oil leaks that you might get between the rear axle housing and the flange cover that holds the bearing. And then the only other way the oil can get out of there, theoretically, is through the seal, but that would get into the inside of the brakes, not the outside of the brakes. Yeah, you're welcome.
Something to keep in mind there is there's a little drain hole at the bottom of that end of the axle. You have to make sure that's clear, because if it's not clear, then any leaking oil will go into the brake area rather than the outside of the axle.
And you're talking about a T-type or you're talking about a B?
The A's and B's, yeah.
Okay, all right.
There's a little drain hole in the bottom of the end of the axle.
Okay,
Make sure that's clear.
thank you. Marty Bradley has the non-approved Permatex Forma-Gasket number 2 sealant that Pat Garrity suggests you don't use, and use Doug Pelton's instead, but I've had excellent success with this. So, oh, and David Wren put in, I can get it here in New Zealand. So, all right. Sam Chapin, post rebuild settings for HIF car. Starts, dies, recheck the float level, jet flush with the float bridge. Plus turns rich, still dies, choke runs with high RPM, 2 to 2,500. So Sam, are you still on? It'd be handy if I could get a little more information here, but HIF carburetors.
I'm there.
Oh, okay, all right, so.
Spacebar didn't work, I don't know.
Hey. So you rebuilt the carburetors?
Yes.
Okay, so do one check that you can do while it's on the car. I mean, before you take them back off to find out you messed up, you switch the floats, you got the float height wrong or something. So take the overflow line, the vent line that goes into the and
Gotcha.
put a 2-foot tube on that, or something, the 3/16 quarter-inch will work too, hose. And take the suction chamber off, the spring, the air piston, and just puff into it, just the slightest puff, and you'll end up with a two-foot column of gasoline that shoots up out of the jet. You go, okay, all right, I know there's gasoline in the carburetor. Then put your finger on the jet and blow so hard you see stars. Don't put an airline to it, you'll blow your carburetor apart, but blow as hard as you can and look at the hole that's to the rear of the jet towards the other carburetor. There's an offset, 2 holes to the rear of the main jet. One's the emulsion tube, which is immediately behind the main jet, and then there's one offset. And if there's any gasoline burbling up through there at all, you got to take the carburetors back off. Well, the reason it's bubbling up through that hole back there is because the choke is on. The choke is on for one of 3 reasons. It's on, somehow it's turned on. The interconnecting link is too long and it's depressed one of the bolts, both of the bolts on each of the carburetors, and has pushed the valves out off their seats. Or the O-ring that you've used in the carburetor is neoprene, not Viton, and it's leaking. So that this means that the choke is on when the choke is off. I mean that you're getting this extra mixture while the choke is off.
Oh, okay.
Your check, it's a real quick check. You just blow really hard, and if you're not exactly sure what I'm talking about, operate the choke while you're doing that with your the tube in your mouth and the finger on the jet, and then operate, turn the jet, and you'll see the gasoline come up out of there.
Right,
But,
okay,
um,
yeah.
But it should, you know, if those jets are flush with the top, that's really lean. I mean, it shouldn't, it should continue to run. I mean, it shouldn't get so rich that it fails. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's a Haynes manual that said 2 turns in after flush.
Okay, sure, it's a
2
start.
turns rich.
Yeah, it's a start.
And then a turn and a half on the idle after it contacts the stop.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Those are
All right.
those are good starting points.
Well, I'll do the blow it until your eyes tear up.
And then till your eyes pop out. And then you can call me tomorrow or Wednesday or something or other too, and I can work with you some more on that. Right?
Yeah. No, originally the motor's a 77 and it's 72. I had it bored out 20 over, but it's all 72 equipment.
Yeah.
It's a D24 and all that jazz, but it had HS6s on it when I got it. Those
are too big. Yeah.
Yeah. So I traded with a guy you might know in Scappoose, Oregon, for a pair of HIF4s. And I'm not so sure about the HF4s.
Good carburetor, best.
Pat Gary loves the HIFs, but I don't. I like HS carburetors because you can always work on the floats.
Right.
You don't have to take them off the car much, but
well,
anyway, so there's a bunch of stuff on those HIFs. You can get the floats switched. You can get them upside down and backwards, and there's just stuff you can do accidentally. You know, when you're building it, stuff that happens.
Well, I've done it twice so far, and mostly because the first reviews I read about HIF4s was that they tend to set fire to themselves, and because the overflow, it gets plugged up, and that didn't seem like something I would look forward to. So
almost anything that goes wrong with an HIF causes it to run rich. Very difficult to have a failure that causes an HIF to run lean, unless there's a vacuum coming through the charcoal canister and putting a vacuum on the float bowl. But that's you always try to run the car without that loop, you know, that goes over to the charcoal canister. Run it with that disconnected, because it shouldn't make one iota of difference if that vent is connected or not. If it's just open to the atmosphere, it shouldn't make any difference at all. If it does, there's something up with the charcoal canister. So
okay, well, I'll note that too.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, John.
I'd like to ask the question, does he have trouble starting the car, that it won't start? Or, you know, it kind of sounds like you might have vacuum leak too.
It takes a fair bit of choke to get it to fire. And then after it runs for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, it starts up easier. So yeah, no, I could check vacuum leak as well. That's a good thought. Seeing as how I've had them off 2 or 3 times so far. And
those carburetor gaskets, those 6 carburetor gaskets, use grease on those, just grease. Yeah. I love grease. Yeah. And then they come on and off 20 times.
Yeah. Well, except for your fingers trying to get the bottom nuts in. That's freaking nightmare.
Yep. Yep.
And John, if I can just point out the mistake I often see on HIFs is people, the cars lean, so they back off on the screw thinking they're riching it up, but the mixture screws are backwards on an HIF.
Yeah. Clockwise is rich.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Pat.
You're welcome. All right.
John.
John Fabry, grease to use specifically for wheel bearing and caliper seal lines when assembling. You mentioned Sil Glide, but that seems to Discuss for sliding caliper pins, not fluid touching grease. I use Sil Glide on all that stuff. Is it more of a rubber compatibility issue than fluid compatibility? I've heard of red rubber grease by description, but it isn't usually something stores carry in stock. I think that red rubber grease was that Girling or was that Lockheed? That used to come in a little tube with a hexagonal or octagonal cap on the little, like a little tiny travel tube of toothpaste, tiny tube. But I use Sil Glide on all that stuff. Just put it in there, and it's always been compatible with brake fluid as far as I know. Silicone fluid or .3, .4. So that should handle that. Marty's got a note on here about Jay Leno and the Element fire extinguishers. John Fabry again, 78 MGB. There is more than just a commission number on the front panel on the front of the radiator. Yes, there is. There's a body number and a commission number and a VIN. They're all different. If the rivet tags have the VIN, what ties the actual body to the VIN? The commission number doesn't seem to be tied to the title or any way to identify the actual chassis. On a 78 MGB, the VIN, not the commission number or the body number, is stamped into the body. It's stamped in the in the trunk, and it's also stamped on the rear side of the right engine mount where you can't read it. Cars apart, you can see it up in there. It's a moot point. Doesn't really make any difference what's going on. Your car is your car. If you want to do genealogy on it, genealogy, you can write to Heritage, and I don't know how much that is now. It must be at least $75, and you get the adoption papers suitable for framing, the date it entered the factory, the date it was dispatched, DES, the date it was dispatched, and whatever numbers they happen to record. Sometimes there's engine numbers, sometimes not. Sometimes there's commission numbers. But when they went through the factory, the body number was the body number, engine number is the engine number. They're coming from other places. They're coming in batches, so there's no sequential relationship between the numbers except by batch. So you'd have to look at a great big long line of numbers to see how those groups of numbers dance around.
Can I clarify a little more on that, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was specifically, my car's never been to the point of being running, but I was just doing some cleaning on it, and I noticed that tag, that it seems like it's spot welded onto the front valence or whatever you want to call that, the slam panel, the commission number.
The bonnet shuck platform. That's the one that starts GBUD.
But there was Bondo over that on the body of my car, which just starts making me point out that what was somebody doing, unless they were trying to do something shady, So I was like, well, how else, if somebody had rebodied or tried to do something shady with the title, what other numbers are there on the body where you could even compare anything? Or because that's not tied to anything, all right?
The VIN is what's stamped in the frame, and it's stamped. Oh, somebody help me out here. Somebody else who knows. It's the rear. Pat Garrity, do you remember?
On a 78.
On a 78, on the late model Bs, it was an anti-theft that the government demanded.
Yeah, as far as I know,
sometimes
there's a stamping, as you say, on the front cross member, a rear right mounting flange on the chassis. The serial number, not the whole VIN number, but the serial number is stamped on there. And that's going to match the VIN number.
Right.
And that's close to where
that's the cross member that holds the front shocks and the rack and pinion and the springs and the wheels and everything is attached to the body. And there's a flange on the right there's two bolts on either side that hold that whole assembly to the body. And the rear one there's some little flanges associated with it. And if you go up in there with a wire brush, either between the engine and the frame, I don't think it's on the outside of the cars. I think it's between the engine and the frame. So
Yeah, it's underneath the car, on the inside of the frame.
Between the rails.
Yeah,
on the,
and
on
you'll
the
have to
vertical
scratch that.
surface.
You'll have to clean that off to see the numbers.
Because I pulled the cross member out right now anyway, so I've got the best, other than the fact that the engine's hanging, I've got the best chance to be able to try to look for another number there.
Right hand side, look yeah.
Where the rear bolt goes up through for the cross member.
Okay, excellent. That's interesting. And you said it should potentially match part of the VIN number. At
No,
least.
No potential about it.
Nothing. Okay.
The numeric part.
It matches your VIN, the 6-digit VIN. 510 282. Forget the GHN 5UL and
right.
G on the end, and just the 6 digits. Yep.
Okay.
It should also match the one that's up on the dash.
Yeah. I mean, I pulled the dash out because I'm working on that, but the tag that's riveted in the door frame, there's actually only one rivet holding that in right now, and it doesn't look like there's another hole there. So some things have kind of stood out in a sequence of events that something's fishy here. Is this something not match? And so I just started wondering, more things. So
well, you can also contact British Motor Heritage in Gaydon, Oxfordshire, and British Motor Heritage, and a lot of people have done that, and you get a real nice certificate. It's all gonna get a nice signature on it and some sort of seal or something or other, and it's got all the information from your car that they can pull from factory records. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it isn't very much, but the color of the car and is made for the United States market and stuff like that. It's real nice. For provenance, it's a really nice thing to have.
The main thing about your car is, do you have a title that matches the VIN number that you can identify? If you have a VIN number and a title for it, you're all set for putting it on the road. But if you don't have any documentation for that particular car to prove ownership, doesn't matter what the numbers are on it.
Yeah, and that's where I all of a sudden got scared. Is like, is this something shady? Because I've got the VIN number tag that's on the door frame, the one on the dash, match the title, but all of a sudden now I'm questioning that, did somebody do something suspicious? It's like, why would you bondo over that?
Don't ask a question that you don't know the answer to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My MGA, my own MGA, I had three different VINs. I had one on the car, one on the title, and one on the registration, and none of them matched. I mean, not exactly, close enough that I got the police to sign off on it, but it was just a hoot. How can you have 3 different numbers on the same car?
A lot of TDs were registered using the engine number, and then the engine was swapped.
Yeah.
I've got that problem.
Yeah.
My Magnet is titled by the engine number, and lo and behold, it has an 1800 engine in it. But if you look at the engine number tag, you'll see it's the same number.
That's good. So someone was doing that. I don't know who's stamping since Todd Clark is gone from the world. I don't know who's stamping out engine plates. That's always something that's needed to be done. I'd be happy to hear who's stamping out plates. You can stamp them out yourself, some of the plates, but the engine plates are reverse stamped. Those are real dicey to do. So.
Well, that's only if you want it to be authentic.
Today we were putting riv nuts in a later midget bonnet to fit an earlier midget bonnet. The thread is 1/4 28. The body shop that I rent space from has a beautiful riv nut tool. Great big long arms, great big thing. Metric, metric 4, 6, 8, 10. Can't put a metric, so then I had to call Forrest, who took over my shop when I closed. And I said, do you have a riv nut tool? Because you always need a riv nut tool to replace the quarter 28 screws that hold the soft tops on. Those get loose and they work out and you break off and stuff. And I think he's still got the same one that I had, which is difficult to use. But you have to have the reverse stamp on your engine. That's the way it's supposed to be. I talked to a guy today with a TF, and he said, oh, every time I use my starter motor, the starter motor jams up against the flywheel. What's wrong with my starter motor? And I said, oh boy, nothing. Something's wrong with your flywheel. And I sort of went through I said that, you only got to take the front of the engine apart and front of the car apart and take the engine gearbox out and take the sump off, take the flywheel off, put another ring gear on it. And as long as you're doing that, you might as well do a clutch and yada, yada, yada. I said, you're 3 or 4 grand into this. I said, or you can buy a high torque pre-engaged starter that fits, that fits right in. I said, of course, it's not right. I would never do that. But I said, it's certainly a couple $100, option instead of doing it right. So anyway, got to have those reverse stamps. I'm interested to know who's going to be doing that. Let's see, John Tershak, on the early 18G and the 18GAB engine, is there anything different on the transmission than the later transmissions? Well, they go to a steel synchro in 65, but that's after the 18GA engine. And then in 67, they go to a larger lay shaft, and that's nice. Then the next year after that, 68, they go to the all synchro box. But now I want to say no, there's no change.
John, isn't the input shaft smaller on the early gearboxes?
18GB. That's where it changes. It goes to 5 main at 18GB. The GA engine only has it's the same as an 18G engine. 18G engine has an oil draft tube dumps off the side, and the 18GA engine has that Smith's PCV valve on it. That's the only difference between those power units. But later, yes, it goes from 5/8 of an inch input shaft to 800 thousandths. Yes. Thanks.
John, the reason why I asked is I come across a B engine, you'll call it a barn find.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyways, if you open the door, you got to crawl over everything to get to the car, 1. 2, you got to fight your way maybe about 200 yards through trees, blackberry bushes and everything to get to it. And to try to get the car out, you've got to clean the whole barn out to get to it. If you try to pull it out the back, you can open up the back door and you have maybe 10 feet, and then you've got a 40 to 50 foot drop off.
Well, this sounds like our friend from New Zealand whose son was in the car wreck. And that doesn't sound like a good idea. Maybe it's a barn find, but maybe somebody else should find it after you. I don't know.
Well, I'm looking at the engine itself for the 3 main to go into a MGA.
Oh, all right. Okay. Well, it's do it. Do it. Empty the thing out and get some chains and straps. All that workshop, all that stuff we talked about, insects and rodents and squirrels and mice and woodchucks. But
well, John, the main thing I'm worried about is how to get it from the barn up to the road.
Call 1-800 tow my MG, a couple $100, somebody will tow it out of there. Now all of a sudden you're into it for a whole lot more than you were at the beginning. But
either a John Deere or a Massey Ferguson.
Well, of course, when someone parked it in there, they parked it with a handbrake on, right? So it wouldn't roll away. So the brakes are absolutely frozen. So you're gonna be dragging the flat tires through the mud too. So yeah, it sounds like a it sounds like a real barn find. But
The helicopter.
depends on the price.
There's guys out there that'll destroy the barn for the contents, maybe take the whole barn down. I don't know.
Oh, no, that lady will not let it. What it was is her husband bought the car probably about over 15 years ago. And he drove it into the back of the barn and just left it.
And he's
He
dead.
died.
Good luck. Good luck with that, John.
Just in case anybody's interested, not trying to sell anything, but I have an 1800 G or early G 3-main all set up for a high starter MGA transmission with the high starter MGA transmission all overhauled that I'd really like to go to a home.
So this is hot. This is hot. So George is going to send me the details. And if you want to know the details from George, I will forward it to you on email. So George, you can get, it's John Twist at universitymotorsltd.com. You can put the information in the chat. If you can do that, that's fine. Marty will blast it out. But if anyone's interested in getting back in touch with George tomorrow, I'll just forward the information that he's sent along. So
thank you.
But as John says, putting a B motor in an A is just not right.
Yeah, and neither putting a B motor in a TD ain't right either.
The fastest MGA I was ever in was a 1500. No idea why it was so fast. Well, I mean, it obviously the engine had been prepped, but it's 300 cc's, a little bit or a whole lot, depending on whether it's in a coffee cup or whether it's in a syringe in the doctor's office and it's supposed to be injected into you. So 300 cc's ain't much. But I know an awful lot of people put B engines in A's, but you don't have, I've got a 1622 in mine, which is obviously the larger engine, the 3-inch pistons. But geez, I can drive at 90, no problem. So you can too.
Harold Shelby put Ford flathead V8s in its TD.
Yeah. We've seen it all. I've seen the Volvo engines in the TD where you had to drive it around you had to keep a smile because your knees were up hitting your chin. Oh my gosh. I've seen some great stuff.
I once drove an A with a Ford 289 in it, and boy, did that feel wrong.
Oh my gosh. Yep. I belong to the I belong to the Daimler and Lanchester Owners Club. Why would I belong to that? Isn't that cheating? But this is the Daimler and Lanchester Owners Club news, and there's been an ad that's run in the back for a Hooper body. You see this looks like a Rolls Royce there, that yellow car there that's in the picture. And anyway, I don't need a Daimler. I had one once. Maybe someday I'd like to get another one. I called on it, and nobody knows anything about it. The guy's dead, and the widow's got a guy that's helping her out with it. He doesn't know anything about it, but he sent me some pictures, and whatever power plant is in that vehicle is not a straight 6 Daimler engine. So I said no thanks. Happens all the time.
John?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I had a question I sent to you direct message. I've never been on this Zoom before. I really appreciate it. Wayne in San Luis Obispo put me onto it. And I don't know if you get to something was sent directly to you.
I don't know. Probably not. Okay. So ask away.
Okay. I've got a 61 MGA
It wasn't charging. It's got an alternator with external regulation hooked up to the control box. I wasn't getting current to the field wire. I discovered that the alternator bulb, ignition warning light bulb had burned out. The alternator works if I jump some wire to the field. But I drove into San Luis Obispo 15 miles to get replacement bulbs, and I bought two. And the first one I screwed in, as soon as I turned the ignition on it, it blew out. It flashed, and then it lost its continuity. So I'm new to all this, and the other thing is it's the control box cover doesn't have a bail or screws on it. It looks like it should be a friction fit, but it seems to be. I don't see how to get the cover off without being violent.
Okay.
Which I don't want to do.
So the MGA came with a generator and a control box. So someone's retrofitted an alternator onto it.
Right. It's a 55 amp with two blades and a battery and a ground done in a shop. And if I jump her to the field wire, to the field terminal, it will respond and charge above the battery voltage.
So the bulbs that you bought from Napa, were they 6 volt or 12 volt? I mean, if they're 6 volt, it'd pop it, but there's no reason.
Well, it was a 12 volt, and that's what they told me.
Yeah, you know where all those bulbs come from now too, but still, it's hard to believe that something's so screwed up that it would pop a bulb. Usually, the bulbs will suffer some higher voltage up to 16, 18 volts or something. So it's hard. I'm out of my league here. I don't know because I can't see it. If you were to take half a dozen pictures of the underbonnet area and send them to me on my phone or by email, I might be able to give you some instruction, but I don't promise because I don't. It's it's aftermarket stuff, and I don't know how it's done.
Okay. The bulb is just labeled CE14 China.
But if it's charging, the bulb's off.
But he said it went to full brilliance and exploded. He did not say it exploded. He said it first out.
Yeah, but it's only charging when I jumper juice
that's how alternators
the
work.
field wire.
Yes, that's how alternators work. They have to be excited in order to charge.
Yeah,
they excite through the bulb.
That. I understand.
Which means it sounds like your regulator is bad.
Okay, and then and I'll send a picture. But it looks like
Jim, you're in San Luis Obispo?
I am nearby. I'm in Los Osos Valley, which is Valley of the Bears.
Where's Pat Garrity? Where do you live, Pat?
Quite a ways away.
Oh,
so
all right.
What I would do, just open up a Summit Racing catalog and get a single wire alternator. So simple, a child could do it.
Okay. All right.
But your bracketry and stuff, is it a GM? Is it a Ford? Is it a Mitsubishi?
Saturn? Saturn's a nice alternator that MGB
they had a lot of fires too.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Jim. I'm sorry that I can't help you on that. At least not right now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm enjoying the discussion.
Thanks. So from Brad Schwartz, I'd like to know some recommended vendors for MGA leather seat covers. Well, of course, there's Moss. But besides Moss, who else makes leather seat covers? I know there's a couple places in England. I've talked to people before who've got them from there.
Scarborough Fair.
Okay, there's two.
Someone wrote in Heritage Upholstery and Trim. And
Okay.
and also I know that Sports and Classics in Stamford, Connecticut makes them also.
He used to be in Darien, Connecticut.
They're in Stamford now. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, they're in Stamford,
Okay.
which is near Darien.
Okay. I've been a long time since I've dealt with him. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm speaking for Scarborough Fair. I believe Cecilia has somebody who makes them in her shop.
Okay.
I think that's true.
Okay, thank you.
Who's the guy in Ontario who makes so much trim? I can't think of his name offhand.
Like McAllister or something like that.
No. Yeah, something like that. Just a minute. But he doesn't do seats. He just does.
Okay.
Oh, come on.
McGregor?
McGregor.
Yeah,
McGregor, yes.
Martin
Yeah.
McGregor.
He does the rubber stuff.
Yeah, right. Just a shot in the dark. Really in the dark because I couldn't think of his name.
Hey guys,
Okay.
Barney.
Hey, Barney, where are you tonight, Barney?
Say what?
Where are you tonight?
Oh, Houston, Texas for change. Let me hang on. I got to kind of unmute myself. There,
you
am I
go.
on now?
Yep, you're on now.
Oh yeah. Well, last week we went down to Boca Chica to check out the rocket factory. So we've been kicking around Texas for a week or so. We're in Houston tonight. I just got new seat covers on my MGA recently, and I got them from Prestige Auto Trim. And they're British, I think, European, okay? And they have a distributor in Canada. And I thought I was ordering them from Canada. And I talked to the guys in Canada and I arranged it, a bunch of email messages, and I ordered the stuff. They had a 40% off sale. And I got new seat cushion covers, an armrest cover, 5 pieces, and a kit. And I think it was right around $400 or something. It was pretty cheap considering.
Yeah.
And apparently they didn't have them in stock. They ordered them out of England and they shipped DHL and they arrived in like 3 days. Really nice seat covers. I like them. And I especially say that because a few years earlier, I bought complete seats from Moss Motors for $2,000 for 2 seats complete. It's supposed to be tan leather. And the upholstery on those turned out to be absolutely garbage, like real thin shaved veneer leather over cheesecloth. And they just disintegrated and fell apart immediately. So I just said, I can't order anything from Moss, but I got these from Prestige and they're very nice.
And they're leather.
They're leather and they're really nice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Another supplier, a little British car, Jeff Zorn, sometimes gets things from England. I know that's true of the hoods, tops. I'm not sure about his seats. I've not checked. I've gone to Scarborough Fair for that. Thank you.
John, this is Judd. I just posted at the bottom of this a link to something on the MG experience, I think it is, where a guy got seat covers for his MGA coupe that included headrests. He's got some pictures on it and a link to where he got them.
Okay.
I don't have any idea about the quality, but you can go to that link that I just put in the chat section and take a look at them. If you like it, that's fine. So a midget came up behind us on our drive today, and he had very nice seats also that he got from one of the like Summit Racing type people. It looked decent, but they weren't fancy, but they were functional. Very nice.
Okay. Roberta, the Crystal Johnson's also weighed in here with mirror, like looking glass, mirror trim out of England. And she's got a link in there too. So yeah. And we got Prestige. And then Doug Miller says, who has seat frames that fit? He didn't say that, but yeah, who has seat frames? I don't know. one of my go-to places, my favorite go-to place is, there are a lot of them around, but is Sports Car Craftsman in Arvada, Colorado. And they'll Paul's got a deluxe. He knows a lot about A's, and Ian's on the front counter now, but they're very, very helpful. So we are down to the end of the meeting chat. We're down to the end of the normal questions and answers. The one that buffaloed me tonight absolutely was the alternator in the MGA. Because it's like, first of all, there's about 100 different types of alternators you can have in there. MG alternators they're self-exciting. So you don't need to have an ignition warning light that comes on that isn't necessary to make it work. But some alternators do need that. So Pat Garrity talked about the one-wire alternator, and those are fine, except what do you do about an ignition warning light? How do you hook that up? Or in any case, there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of stuff on the web about how to convert. But again, you have to read that stuff so very cautiously and be really careful with what you do. Not everybody's straight up about their success. So anyway, that's it for tonight. Our next meeting will be in, help me out, Marty, when's that going to be? 2 weeks, about the 27th?
27th.
27th, okay. And just nominally at this point, we're going to talk about long distance driving. So Bob and Gloria will be our featured guests. Because they do more long distance. Judd does a lot of driving, but Bob and Gloria get a long way from home. And anyway, I've got my trip pack, which I'll take a look at and try to update, try to get it up on the web. And every time we have this, I always say, oh, I'm going to get on, get my stuff together and get the videos from, January.
Yep. That's Memorial Day, so we gotta adjust it.
Oh, it's Memorial Day? Oh, yeah, it sure is. Well, looks like it's probably going to be the 3rd then, huh? Maybe? I don't know. Marty and I'll figure it out. But, well, I'll send out a note, and maybe we'll try to send out a note a little early to let everybody know what it might be. We got to fiddle around here, just make sure everything lines up. I'm going to GOF Central, which is the week of the 17th of June. So I'm going to be in NERC, Ohio on that day, on that week. And then I'm going to the MGA meet out in Oregon, in Washington, one of the two of them.
Yep, Oregon.
Oregon, thank you.
July 15th to the 19th.
Yeah, in July. So that is the news from here, from Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I'm going to change my view here and get a gallery view, and just thank everybody for coming on tonight and being here and helping out with answers. And Judd always helps out a lot, and Bob and Gloria are always helpful, and Barney's here, Pat Garrity, Fred Horner always has a lot to say about stuff. So it's wonderful having the group here. And don't forget me. Send me something on PayPal when your paycheck comes in, and we'll all stay in touch or we'll be in touch again at our next Zoom session.
Our summer party is August 16th through the 17th in Grand Rapids. The website isn't quite updated yet, but you can mark your calendars.
And we don't have a code from the hotel yet either. I got a note from Tony Burgess saying he called the hotel and they said what event, so we have to get that sorted out this week. So anyway, thanks everybody for hanging in there and making it a nice meeting tonight. And I added a whole lot of stuff on workshop safety from people. cell phone in your pocket to the shelving to the car cover, which catches on fire. So, yep. So Doug.
Hey, John, if you have a minute, I have a safety note on hydraulic floor jack.
Yeah.
And that is, don't ever trust a hydraulic floor jack. Jack something up with a hydraulic floor jack, have a jack stand in the other hand, put it right alongside the jack. Some years ago, I had a little cheap hydraulic jack that didn't work, and I went and bought a really nice one from a tool store for big money. Brand new heavy-duty hydraulic floor jack, all iron, beautiful. The first time I jacked the car up with it, I went, this is going really great. It's got nice high lift, 17 inches or something it went up. And just as it got to the top of the stroke, there's a little pressure relief valve. So you can't overstroke the thing. Well, just as it hit the top of the stroke, hits the pressure relief valve, and the whole thing just collapsed and went right down to the floor.
Oh my
And
gosh.
wouldn't jack up again after that. Brand new jack, right? Nice heavy duty one. So he took it apart and did an autopsy. Found out there's a little piece of casting sand that got caught in the pressure relief valve. The first time the pressure relief valve actuated, it just stuck open and the jack just went right to the floor. So even brand new tools, don't trust the damn things.
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Yep. So, Doug, are you still on our official counter? Even though Marty counts now, but is Doug still there? Because I brought a hat, although I probably, Doug and I have a hat contest. This is from the Namgabur meet in Buffalo in 1993, maybe, or
97.
When was that?
It's in 97, it says.
That late? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, anyway, mine says Buffalo MG sponsor. So that and $5 will get me a crummy cup of coffee at Starbucks, but I do have this hat. So. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. So thanks for being on. Thanks for adding all the information. I mean, I do most of the talking, I know, but it's a real good place to hear other people's ideas and transfer a lot of knowledge. So thanks very much.
Thank you, John. Good night.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Good night, Mary Ellen.
Good night, John Boy.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thank you.
Drive your
John
MG.
Boy.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim Pastor. Hey, hi. Hey, that's Jim. The Daimler guys are up there, so that the whole front page was about hotel problems in Altoona. You said that the school is moving in that weekend, the same weekend or something. You're muted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it the same weekend? Where are they at?
They're meeting at your place.
Really? Same weekend?
Yeah. We are on track for Rally 2024 in Altoona, PA. We're waiting on an official flyer for the meet so we can register for the event.
I should contact them.
All right.
What day is that?
Weekend of the 23rd, 4th, or 24th and 25th.
What month?
August, sorry.
I will, I'll take a picture of this and send it to you right now so you can directly communicate with the guy. He's from PA. He's from, no, excuse me, George. No, this is Bob. Bob's the president and the editor is out of Yorktown, Virginia, but I think Bob Santoro, I think he is, yeah. The festivities with the Central Pennsylvania British Car Club really kick off Friday evening.
Well, that's news to me.
Well,
I mean, welcome, but I know that the Rolls Royce, I think it was either Rolls Royce or somebody was at Leonard Fiore's last week.
Oh, okay.
They were old cars. They were all over town.
This guy's from Cincinnati. That's Bob, President Bob is from Cincinnati. I'll take a picture and send that to you right now. Alpha Cars, ALFA. Alpha Cars at live, LIVE.com. Alpha Cars at live.com.
All right, I'll Google it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was one of my first car meets ever, was the 1980 Daimler and Lanchester Owners Club meeting in Cleveland, Ohio. I think there were probably 12 cars there. And including one that we later worked on. About 10 of them were the Daimler Dart, the SP 250, the ugliest British car ever made. But it's a V8. I think it's a 2500 cc V8 in a fiberglass body, so it goes a million miles an hour. But the back end of the car looks like a TR4, but the front mouth looks like a largemouth bass. It's
It's really an ugly car.
Oh, geez. Anyway, but they go like stink, so. Yeah.
Remember for next time, the worst thing you can do to your car, or one of the worst things, is not drive it. We need to drive our cars, and don't be afraid to take it anywhere, cross country. We drove to Alaska one year, so I trust the car. It's very simple. You can do whatever you need to do on the side of the road if that happens.
Yeah, I did. I got you two stacked right on top of each other. I got Barney right below you, and Barney's got hundreds of thousands of miles on his MGA too. So
he's been to Alaska too.
Twice.
I've only been there once. But I have the same engine in my car.
Okay, well, thank you all very much. We're gonna sign off now. So,
thanks, John.
all right,
Thanks, John. Good night.
Right.
Good night, Don. Thank you.
Good night.
Hey, good night. Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.